The joy of being human. Through the accumulation of various traits, norms, and intelligence, to name a few, humans have developed many constructs that enable them to accomplish certain goals. If we can believe our own assumptions, then it would be reasonable to suppose that hominoids, as human-ascribed creatures, must possess similar traits to be classified within the hominoid group. The evolution of humans dictates that they evolved from man-like apes to ape-like men. Since these classifications were devised by humans, how can one know that they were not flawed, or even deliberately distorted to serve certain ends? If hominidae is part of the primate group, and this is the very group that created the classification system of human development, then the inaccuracies of that system are self-evident. Since humans have no barometer to determine the mental makeup of any group or individual, it would be reasonable to assume that humanity itself is most difficult to define for people tethered only to one dimension. Some of us believe that humanity encompasses conduct that pleases their creator, or godly conduct. For eons, certain groups within the species hominidae have taken it upon themselves to create means of preserving what they believe to be godly traits, if you will. Doing so would enable them to pass these findings down to their progeny, hoping to create a society respectful of the conduct that allowed them to live in harmony. They scratched their findings onto rocks, walls, and artifacts to preserve their essence. They enshrined animals, insects, and other creatures of nature to remind them of these godly traits. Their means of preservation were always time-sensitive. Then there were others. Others came with different mindsets. They did not understand why some sought to preserve conduct that pleased God, or was displeasing to God. Their outlook was adversarial, and their primary aim was to subdue other hominoids. As a result, they saw no reason to respect their opponents' findings. Instead, they focused on conquest, seizing anything of value and discarding what they considered useless. They kept whatever served their purposes, while collecting and storing things they did not understand in vast containers. After defeating one group, they moved on to other lands, taking the treasures and cultures of others. Over time, they discovered that these accumulated resources helped them subdue more people and, eventually, entire nations. They found great value in deception. Because they did not appreciate the mores of other peoples or their beliefs, they had no compunction about creating systems of deception such as artificial intelligence, commonly known as AI. They even took the etchings of other cultures and deliberately used them as mechanisms of deception. Sacred beliefs were among their most precious arsenals. They mastered the art of physical deception so thoroughly that they eventually began to fool themselves, their children, and anyone else who had reason to listen to them. Because of their vast accumulation of human contributions, they came to believe that they were the creators of all that is and was. They project their prominence upon the entire planet to deceive its inhabitants into believing them in all ways of thinking. In their infinite wisdom, some have created categories for other hominoids to embrace, and have used these categories to turn the categorized against one another. Because most of them are tethered exclusively to the physical realm, they refuse to acknowledge other dimensions. This mentality alone speaks volumes. They are fully aware of the power that exists within other dimensions, but they were never forced to indulge in these dimensions as others they have subdued have been. The subdued have been observing their conduct all along, but, because of dimensional wisdom, they were hesitant to use tactics to combat them, even though fully capable of doing so. They understood that time would eventually change the course. This is why I am writing this blog. It is nigh. For one to understand the critical timing, one must be fully aware of the limitations of physical energy. All activities within the universe require energy. This is why there is so much hullabaloo about it. Energy can be derived from many sources. The most important type, however, comes from the Earth's rotation on its axis as it revolves around the Sun. Some have embraced these truths while enduring unmitigated pain. Ancient cultures placed enormous emphasis on sun-related energy. To the contrary, however, those who have gained unprecedented wealth, power, and control have bet their bottom dollars on their physical intelligence, which is limited in scope but requires enormous amounts of, you guessed it, energy. Nonetheless, spiritual energy is a linchpin for deception. Those endowed exclusively with physical acumen will resort to their spiritual hat trick to continue deceiving the multitude of physical prowess. Their vast treasures, absconded from those they have subdued for eons, enable them to place emphasis upon spiritual excellence. This is why they believe that their deceptive embrace of it is the catch-all. Masters of spiritual and mental dimensions see right through them. They are not fooled by the changing of religious names or the altering of bylaws to produce a following. These deceivers have unwittingly placed millions in horrific physical pain, stress, and hopelessness, unaware of the consequences of doing so. They have used their dog whistles to attract people with similar mentalities to stand by and entertain themselves, to their chagrin, while others suffer great long suffering. Some have only accelerated their own demise. They have enabled those they have tortured to master unfamiliar dimensions and pass on their wisdom to their progeny. Most humans are unaware of the extraordinary mental energy that can be obtained by visiting unfathomed dimensions exclusively. There is a silver lining in all good things, nonetheless. Even after all their long suffering, those who have endured physical atrocities understand the power in abstaining from enabling equal retribution. They now appreciate the joy of humanity through their ability to please God. Nonetheless, mental stress is equally as stressful as physical.